Coming up on Network Africa. New Chinese Foreign Minister King Kang embarks on the first Africa tour, starting with Ethiopia. Senegal bans night buses, importation of second-hand tires after deadly accident that claimed 39 lives on Sunday. And Sierra Leonean ex-rebel commander is in court in Finland on charges of committing atrocities in Liberian civil war. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. We start off with news that the newly appointed Chinese Foreign Minister King Kang is in Ethiopia to kick off a week-long tour to 5 African countries. He was welcomed in the capital, Addis Ababa, this morning by his Ethiopian counterpart, Demeke Mekonnen. Mr. King, who until recently was ambassador to the United States, became the foreign minister in late December. He's expected to meet senior African Union officials during his trip in Ethiopia and visit the Chinese-funded headquarters for the continent's Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Addis Ababa. Mr. King will thereafter proceed to Gabon, Angola, Benin, and Egypt. China is a major trading partner with African countries. Let's get more of this. Joining me now is African Affairs analyst Chude Ajike. He joins us virtually from Lagos. Thanks for joining us today on the program.
Thank you very much, Joke.
So tell us, how important and significant is the new Chinese foreign minister's visit to Africa?
Extremely very important for the Chinese. Perhaps more so than, to Africa. The battle, for Africa has started in earnest. People are talking about the second scramble for Africa. But this is even beyond the first scramble for Africa, because right now you have most of the major powers being involved in Africa at the same time simultaneously. There was a time when we had this fierce competition for Africa between the Russians, the Soviet Union and the satellite states, and the United States and the Western countries. But now you have, you have the Americans, you have the Europeans, you have the Russians, you have the Chinese, you have the French, you have the Turkish, you have the Israelis also in Africa. So it's going to be a very fierce battle. And obviously right now the Chinese are having an upper hand because they have been in the continent for some time now, and they have consolidated. They have spent over $260 billion so far in Africa, where you have a former global power, which in Africa, it's the United States spending about $61 billion. So they are also worried about the last visit of African heads of state to the United States and the promises made to the continent. So they are here to consolidate on the arrangements they already have, the commercial ties that they already have with Africa. So it is of great importance to the Chinese.
So Ethiopia is the first leg of his tour. Then he's expected to visit Gabon, Angola, Benin Republic, and Egypt. So I'm curious, what are these African countries expected to benefit from his trip?
Well, I'm worried about the unilateral visits, that he's making to some of these African countries. Don't forget that when African heads of state had to go to China to meet Xi Jinping, they went as a group, the continent of Africa going to China as a group. The same thing they did with the United States, they went as a group. When they met with Putin in Russia, they met as a continent. They went as a continent. Same with France and and Turkey. And so when you have this bilateral relation between China and African countries, it's a little bit worrisome, because you would think that Africa is treated as a continent that is a country. Unfortunately for now, that is the way it is. So they need to, this is the time for Africa to begin to speak with one voice. This is the time, for Africa to have specific policy statements, with regards to their relationship with the rest of the world. Since everybody now sees Africa as a beautiful bride, the bride should be in a position to give demands to the suitors, and whichever suitors are able to meet up with the expectations of the bride, then obviously, the bride would have all the advantages. So I think that Africa should be looking at having advantages. Africa is weakened more when you have when they have this one-on-one, discussions. African countries have this one-on-one discussions with China. Let them have articulate, policies that are of common interest to African countries, and then ensure that anywhere he makes a stop, the Chinese make a stop, it is the same demand that is being made, not on the basis of the interest of an African state, but on the basis of a continental interest. I think that makes a lot of sense. Africa again must go beyond being a place where raw material is extracted to the rest of Europe. We should begin to talk about developing, the productive capacity of Africa. Africa is contributing just about 3%, of production to global, to global trade. Africa should be able to do much more than that. So we need to keep our resources as much as possible, and then run, factories in Africa that will add value to the products we have, so that we can also give employment to our own people. So there has to be a give and take relationship, right now. So most of this is skewed against Africa.
Right, so I'm also curious, there are just specific countries mentioned, 5 of them on this tour. I'm not sure if it's the first leg of a tour or if these are the only African countries that he'll be visiting. I don't hear places like Nigeria or Ghana. So are these countries being left out, or do you think that he will still visit some of these, seemingly important countries on the continent?
No, I think the visit is more of a symbolic rather than a functional kind of a visit, because already the Chinese have, the countries you mentioned, Nigeria, China, Ghana, for instance, are countries where the Chinese have heavily invested in diplomacy and then invested a lot of money in. And so whether they come here physically or not, they are very much on ground, in these countries. So it's not about slighting Nigeria or Ghana or any other country, but I think this visit is more or less symbolic. Don't forget that the American Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was here some time ago, and other countries have been, and Macron himself of France has been in Africa some time ago. So this visit really by the Chinese foreign minister is just a visit of reassurance, to consolidate on the partnership that they have, and then to give Africa that feeling that they still figure very much in the foreign relations objectives of the Chinese.
So the West has also been wooing Africa. We've had the US-Africa summit, of course, the China-Africa summit, as we've been speaking about, amongst others. Having been an entrenched partner, is it possible that Africa will dislodge China in favor of the West?
No, I do not think so. I think African relationship with China is very deep, and the Chinese have made sure of that. I think the people, those that are going to actually lose out, if you begin to ask yourself what more the West is going to get from Africa. Africa used to be originating hub for a supply of crude oil to the West and to the United States. Of course, don't forget that they started the fracking technology in the United States, and then there's a bigger, a very serious attempt to de-emphasize fossil fuel because of the global crisis and the pressure that Western capitalist countries are under to limit the use of fossil fuel. So a lot are beginning to talk about electric vehicles and other sources of cleaner energy, alternative sources of energy. So it was as a result of that they felt that Africa was not as useful as Africa used to be. But then you also have the technology for the development of electric cars. The raw materials are found in Africa. The phone technology, raw materials are found in Africa. And so you have a lot of, foreign countries, companies, even in the West, being operational in Africa. But let me just say this, some of the crises in Africa for a very long time has been speculated that the Western countries are either directly behind this crisis or that they have companies, from the West that are behind this crisis. For instance, what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So perhaps Africa could use this as a basis, to also negotiate with some of these Western countries to stop giving support to some of these countries that are causing problems within the African continent, of course, in exchange for improved relationship. But as for whether they can destroy the Chinese, they do not have the capacity. I think the horse bolted out of the barn. And so what they are trying to do is just to close the barn door after the horse had already bolted.
African Affairs Analyst Chide Ajike would like to thank you for your time today on the program.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Joker.
Let's move on. Over in Senegal, the government announced new measures today to fight against road insecurity, including a ban on night bus trips and the importation of second-hand tires. This comes after an accident that killed 39 people on Sunday. At the end of a government meeting in the new town of Dianadio, near Dakar, the Prime Minister Amadou Ba announced that public passenger transport vehicles will be banned from traveling on interurban roads between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. Buses, called shuttles, carrying passengers and goods, many of which travel at night from region to region, are one of the main means of transport in Senegal and cause many accidents. Other measures prohibiting the importation of second-hand tires and making mandatory the sealing of speedometers of vehicles transporting people and goods at 90 kilometers per hour are also announced at the meeting today. Road accidents officially kill 700 people every year in Senegal, a West African country of more than 17 million inhabitants. The new measures were announced after the collision between two buses that killed 39 people and injured 101 in the village of Sikilo in the Kafrine region, some 250 kilometers from Dakar. Mozambique's Interior Minister Arsenia Masinge says that the legal procedures are underway for the extradition of a suspected kidnap kingpin who was arrested on Saturday night in neighboring South Africa. Ismail Mangi, 50, who is wanted in his home country in connection to several kidnappings there in recent years. He was arrested near South Africa's capital, Pretoria, following an international arrest warrant issued by the Mozambican authorities. A suspected warlord from Sierra Leone has appeared in an appeals court in Finland, accused of atrocities in Liberia's civil war. Retrial was ordered after Gabriel Masaki was acquitted by a lower court last year. The trial will move to Liberia next month and then to Sierra Leone. Mr. Masaki was arrested in Finland in 2020, accused of murder, rape, and other war crimes. He was a senior commander in the Revolutionary United Front, a Sierra Leonean rebel group that also fought in Liberia. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed and mutilated in the Sierra Leonean and Liberian wars of the 1990s and early 2000s. And the South African Health Department is meeting with scientists to gather more information about the highly transmissible XBB 1.5 COVID-19 variant. It's tweeted that official communication will be made soon. The department is urging South Africans in the meantime to vaccinate, get boosters, wear masks, keep social distancing, avoid overcrowded places, and wash their hands regularly. And still ahead on the program. Djibouti signs a deal with Hong Kong for a $1 billion rocket launch site. Details in a moment. Welcome back to the program. In Rwanda, President Paul Kagame says his country will no longer offer refuge to people fleeing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Decades of instability in the east of the country has forced scores of refugees across the border into Rwanda. The presidency has shared Mr. Kagame's remarks in a tweet, which says, "We have had refugees here for over 20 years from the DRC, and refusing that Rwanda should carry this burden and be insulted and abused every day about it." He said the rest of the world had completely missed the point when it came to Eastern DR Congo. The real threat to security, in his view, is what he describes as the remnants of Hutu extremist forces who tried to wipe out his Tutsi ethnic group in the 1994 genocide. Rwanda is being accused of backing the M23 rebel group, which the country has always denied. The rebel group has captured swathes of territory in the recent months, sending tens of thousands of refugees across the border into Rwanda. Kenya Airways says it's experiencing flight disruptions as a result of delays in getting parts for aircraft maintenance. The airline's chief executive, Alan Kilavuka, who made the announcement, added that the airline could be forced to cut some flights should the challenges persist. He blamed the Russia-Ukraine war for the problem, which he said had crippled the supply chain of Russian raw materials crucial in the aviation industry. Some of the materials sourced from Russia include 100% titanium used on Embraer and 35% titanium used on Boeing. And the Djibouti authorities have signed a preliminary agreement with Hong Kong Aerospace Technology Group for the development of infrastructure for launching satellites and rockets in the Horn of Africa country. Djibouti President Ismail Omar Guelleh presided over the signing of the accord. The project, which will cost approximately $1 billion and take 5 years to complete, will also involve the construction of a port and highway in the northern Obok region. I want to remind you about that story from Rwanda, where the President Paul Kagame has insisted that his country will no longer offer refuge to people fleeing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The country has experienced decades of instability in the east of the country, which has forced a lot of people, refugees mainly, into the border, into Rwanda. The presidency shared Mr. Kagame's remarks in a tweet where he said that they've had refugees for over 20 years from the DRC, but he's refusing that Rwanda should carry this burden and be insulted and abused every day about it. He said the rest of the world had completely missed the point when it came to Eastern DR Congo. He believes the real threat is security and what he describes as remnants of Hutu extremist forces who tried to wipe out his Tutsi ethnic group in the 1994 genocide. Rwanda, if you recall, is being accused of backing the M23 rebel group, which the country has always denied. The rebel group has captured swathes of territory in recent months, sending tens of thousands of refugees across the border into Rwanda. Let's now return you to that story here in Nigeria, in Rivers State, the south of the country, where the police command has busted a child trafficking syndicate operating in the state capital, Port Harcourt. The police acted on intelligence and the command raided 2 buildings at the Igworuta and Omagwa communities, both in Ikwere local government area of the state, where victims of child trafficking were being kept. The young girls were rescued and some of the alleged traffickers were arrested.
It's a sorry sight at this police monitoring facility at Old GRA in Port Harcourt, as one by one, the victims of a child trafficking ring are led out, some as young as 15 and heavily pregnant, while others are carrying infants already delivered. They were lured here, allegedly, by the promise of financial reward, depending on the sex of the baby they deliver. One of them tells us she was promised a sum of 800,000 naira if she gives birth to a male child, and 700,000 naira for a female child.
I was pregnant in one boy. Her name is King. I say that as I don't have rape, as the pregnancy entirely was a mistake. So I will say the pikin I use help myself.
The reason why I'm brought to this place is because I was pregnant and my boyfriend left me and went away after delivering. After delivering, then she will get rid of the baby, then give me some of the money.
To get rid of the baby, like
she will sell it.
This story is confirmed by a suspected accomplice who goes by the name of Peace, one of the 4 arrested suspects arrested at the scene, who are believed to be running the syndicate. She claims she was merely providing shelter and care for the pregnant girls in her home.
She asked me, that, favor, how much they used to do it. I said, I don't know what is in your home, whether it's a baby boy or a baby girl. But if it's a baby boy, they will give you like 800,000. If it's a girl, they will give her 700,000. That is what I told her.
Before, how much did they pay for boy?
Normally, boy na 800.
Then girl, how much?
Girl 700.
Providing an update on the incident, however, spokesperson of the State Police Command explains that at the moment, the victims and suspects are in the custody of the CP Monitoring Unit, but will soon be transferred to the State Criminal Investigation Department for further investigation.
The victims were rescued in the operation. Most of them were pregnant, and one of them, her name is Precious. She is 19 years old. She came all the way from Lagos State to River State to deliver her baby. And she also gave the useful information that she came to deliver her child. She is a student, and depending on the sex of the child, that if the child is a male, then the child will be sold for 800,000, while if the child is a female, she'll be sold for 700,000.
A similar case was uncovered by the State Police Command last year, and the victims in that incident have been reunited with their families.
Before we go, let's get more on the story about the Rwanda situation and about the President Paul Kagame saying he will no longer accept refugees from the DRC. Let's bring in Jetta Otonio, African Affairs Analyst, who joins us virtually also from Lagos. You're welcome to the program.
It's good to have you. Thank you. Good afternoon and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. So very quickly, do you see Rwanda's move as a threat to evict thousands of Congolese refugees living in Rwanda? Do you see Rwanda's move as a threat to evict thousands of Congolese? Yeah.
I'm sure. Thank you very much. I'm sure that Paul Kagame has become overwhelmed by the situation in DR Congo and the outpouring of refugees every second into the borders of Rwanda. Of course, this was not unexpected because the crisis that is playing out in DR Congo is not unconnected to the crisis, the genocidal crisis that erupted between the Tutsis and the Hutus in 1994. And then the regrouping of the Hutus in the eastern region of DR Congo. Of course, we all know that over time, through the decades, playing close to over 40 years now, the crisis has snowballed and practically enveloped the whole of DR Congo. So being the immediate neighbor, there's scarcely anything that is not expected. The refugees will continue to pour in. It's unfortunate that the international community has not been able to arrest the situation. Sad.
Right, so according to the United Nations, UN High Commission for Refugees, about 72,000 Congolese refugees fled to Rwanda. Where will these refugees go now? Isn't this an attempt to push them back to the conflict zone where they fled initially?
It's going to be difficult by the authorities in Rwanda to push them back, because practically all the neighbors of DR Congo have become participants in the theater of the crisis going on in DR Congo. Uganda is a participant, Namibia, Angola, quite a number of the countries are participants in the crisis. And I'm sure they must also have their fair share of refugee situation playing out in DR Congo. It's a situation that is benumbing to the whole of Africa. And indeed, that's why we call it the Great War of Africa. Civilians, soldiers, rebels have also been partaking in the war there. I wonder when this is going to play out, when it's going to end, but it's also enveloping the whole of the South as well. So it's an unremitting situation, and I do not see how Rwanda is going to get out of this. Knowing that the underpinnings of the crisis itself, the M25, it's Tutsi-led. And don't forget, Paul Kagame is a Tutsi. And so it's been said that there's some form of tacit support for the M25 or M23, as they call them. So,
right.
Yes.
I'm afraid I must leave it there. Thank you so much for your time today, Jetta Otonio, African Affairs Analyst.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for watching Network Africa. I'm Joker Rogers. Bye for now.